Neil, the results of the State of Dock and Yard Management Survey are in, and the headline is a little uncomfortable. In 2026, when peak season hits, 51% of operators reach for overtime, 50% hire temp labor, and only 34% turn to technology. I've been in this category for like 26 years now. Category yard management, dock scheduling.
Yeah.
And that ratio, 3 to 1, people over platforms, that's the same ratio that we would have seen in 2010 and probably even earlier.
Wow. So what's the read? Has nothing changed?
Well, things have changed. Tools have gotten better. Visibility has gotten better. But the operator under pressure in the moment that matters most, he's still making the same choice. And I think this survey is going to tell us something real about why that's happening.
Okay.
And today we're walking through the second annual State of the Industry report. So 149 supply chain professionals surveyed independently by Charlie Pesty and his team. They used the same methodology as last year. And so we can compare the 2025 results to 2026. And, we'll be comparing apples to apples, basically.
And we both agreed before we started this that we'd say the hard things out loud.
Definitely.
Some of those things are uncomfortable for buyers, some are uncomfortable for vendors, some are uncomfortable for the industry as a whole.
Cool. Well, let's get into it.
Okay, quick context. 149 respondents, a mix of manufacturing, retail, parcel, and grocery. Operator heavy, decision maker rich. The people in the survey are people who actually run yards for a living and the people who actually sign off on the technology.
Yeah, and that really matters because this isn't just a vendor survey. It's a survey of people who already who it's not a survey of people who've already bought something. It's and they're just there to defend what they've decided already on doing. It's a survey of actual operators who are living it, which is why we trust the data. It's even the parts that we'd rather not kind of hear.
hmm So what are the headlines?
Well, the first headline is the inefficient manual processes are now the number one operational challenge in dock and yard. And that's cited by 40% of respondents, and that's up from around 36 in 2025. So the problem's gotten worse, and not just by a rounding error. That's like almost 4.5 points.
Yeah, I want to take this one, Greg, because when I read that number, my first reaction, it wasn't surprise, it was recognition. When I was running the hub network in the UK supply chain, manual workarounds were not really workarounds. They were just part of the everyday.
Yeah.
Okay, whether that was, spreadsheets, phone calls, it could be running out of the office to go and speak to a driver who'd lost their way. You didn't really call that manual work. That was just Tuesday, right?
Right. And that's really the essence of it all. I mean, the industry, and we've seen this for, again, 26 years, the manual aspect of things it's just been normalized, right? And so essentially it's so deeply embedded, they don't even really see that as a problem anymore.
Yeah, and I think maybe the thing that the survey doesn't ask explicitly, but I'll say from experience, is most of those manual touches, they don't exist. They kind of exist because nobody had a better way, right? It doesn't always fit into the operation, and it just runs, right?
Yeah.
Trucks get out, customers get their goods, people carry on, right? And you can buy a beautiful piece of technology or software, but if you still have to text your drivers, if you still have to write stuff on a whiteboard, if you've
Yeah.
still got workarounds that happen on paper or over the phone, you haven't removed all of the manual work. You've just replaced it with some other stuff, and you've just added a system on the workarounds you already had.
No, exactly. So, I mean, the question really isn't, is there technology? It's more, is that technology replacing a manual aspect of things, or is it sitting alongside it? And, we've seen that recently with, we had a large, we just implemented our system with a very large grocer in the US, and they had a system. They had a system that was implemented. And unfortunately for them, their carriers were still calling. It was a appointment scheduling system. So carriers were still calling in. So you've spent all that effort and time and money on putting a system in, but because it wasn't embedded properly, you're still getting those manual touches.
Yeah, and during the peak, that's when you really see the things start to creak, right? You're doing stuff outside the system because everything you needed from the vendor that they said they would do actually doesn't work in reality. Too much pressure, too much volume, new people, untrained folk that are, they're firefighting, they're
Yeah,
treading water. And, we've watched it happen. And, because people trust what they trust and they know they're good at working around, they default to that and just do it that way.
exactly. So that's what really brings us down to that 51-50-34 split I mentioned earlier, is that at peak season, you've got overtime, temp labor, and technology falls in last. So, I mean, Neil, you lived it. Like, why do operators always revert to that?
I guess that, especially in peak mode, you're just in survival
Yeah,
mentality,
no,
right?
that's a
So
good point.
sitting around getting a vendor on the phone, hey, Mr. Software Guy, you promised me X and it's not delivering, is not really going to get your trucks, trailers, drivers, boxes, food moving, right? What you do is you go into survival mode and you solve the problem. Quick fix, efficient, get it done. But it's something that needs to be done in 24 hours, not in 6 weeks. So it's necessity. That's the game. Um, you know, you can get an extra 30 heads into a warehouse at peak times. People are set up for it. Whereas the technology gap is not necessarily solvable without getting around the table with your vendor and all the stakeholders. That might take 6 weeks. Meanwhile, your competition is flying, you're having a struggle, your clients are going mad, and the end user's not getting their stock. So you don't have it, you got to get it done, and you survive. You make do, you work
Yeah.
around.
Well, and we see this all the time. I like to refer to it as kind of the silver bullet syndrome.
Yeah.
And it's, we've got people calling us and hoping for some kind of miracle solution where, yeah, we offer a great solution, as do other vendors, but it requires a lot more effort than just kind of hope and pray.
Yeah. And I think it's often maybe the executives think that the operators end up in the peak and it just happens like that. The trap happens, they fall into it. But the guys that don't end up there, the savvy people, the people that did it well, is because they're planning in the off season.
Yep.
Well before the peak, they are out there putting in the work, getting their requirements, understanding what technology is right for them, well implemented so that when peak comes, because it's coming every year, it gets bigger and bigger on the whole, that, you know, people and platforms work in kind of, work in tandem, and you hit the ground running. You're not having that big shock of peak because you've
Yep.
planned.
No, exactly. So, I guess the reframe is more useful than the headline number. I mean, that 34% who reach for technology in peak aren't really, they're not smarter operators. They're just operators that made that decision. They planned ahead 12 months
Yeah.
ago.
And the 51% from the report who reached for the overtime, they didn't fail in the peak. They failed in the planning cycle
Take
times
time.
before,
Yeah,
right?
totally. So this is going to come up again later in the data, by the way. So we'll just hold that thought and kind of move on to the next section. Um, so let's talk about the actual buying picture. And this is where 2026 gets really interesting because the buyers changed.
Yeah. So, I mean, what eased and the things that got better, I guess, is what I'm interested in. The real positives of this report is, I guess, some of the things that surprised me, like yard congestion, Greg, like that dropped quite a lot. I mean, how do you see that?
Well, I mean, real-time visibility is still the number one feature, and that's coming in at 59%. That's basically unchanged from last year. Um, Buyers still want visibility,
Yeah.
but look at what moved underneath it. Integration with existing systems went up to 43 from 41 almost. Not a huge move there, but scalability and customization, that nearly doubled. So it went from 12.4 last year to 23.5 this year. And implementation effectiveness is now the number one driver of software satisfaction. And that came in at around 55%. That's ahead of features, support, and even price, which that surprised me.
Yeah, I think it's clear that buyers want visibility. That's a prerequisite, it seems, right? They're not
Yeah,
treating it as a
that's
destination. It's
yeah.
just one of the facilitators to get to where they want to go,
No,
right?
exactly. That's exactly it. And visibility used to be the prize. Now it's just the floor, right? So everyone assumes they're going to get that. And so now the differentiator uh, is like, what are you going to do with that information, right?
Exactly. And when I was on the buyer side, we had visibility tools, and let's face it, they looked good, they demoed well, they excited people, but nobody really used them,
Yeah.
right? Unfortunately, a dashboard that tells you a truck is late is good. But if you don't have any scheduling or you don't have execution software that's going to do something about it, then you just see the fire slightly earlier. Still the fire, still burns, still causes
Yeah.
problems. So you end up watching the problem in higher resolution than you had done before, right?
No, exactly. I mean, and like you say, visibility without action, it's just a dashboard, really. That's all it is.
Exactly. I think buyers have figured that out, right? A great line that I read somewhere: visibility without execution is just theater.
You
So
know.
guess what it is, right? And the survey data shows that, integration and scalability is much more important, right, than just visibility on its own. So, that is something that's changed quite
Yeah,
heavily
yeah.
from a year ago.
Great. So here, this is another thing that this is another finding that I'd like to dig into a little bit because I think one of the most interesting data points in the whole report. Ease of use has dropped as a satisfaction driver. It went from 60.5% last year to 52% this year. That's almost an 8-point drop in 12 months.
And how do you read that?
Well, I have a theory. I'd like to hear yours first, but because you bought software, you sat in those demos,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, my read is that the buyers got burned, right?
Mm.
The demos all looked
Okay.
flashy, they looked great, UI slick, everything's great. But, pretty dashboards are one thing. If the vendors all produce something, if the buyers are not really understanding where they want to go, requirements, integration, system stability, you know, if you don't get all that right, which is often something you find out post contract signature, maybe even post go live, that's when the buyer gets really burned. And often they don't want to make that mistake again. And it just causes, indecision, fear. And I guess sometimes they end up downgrading usability from the manual system that kind of worked before because they knew how to use it. With
Yeah.
this new system, they don't know how to get to work. So one thing that is throughout this report is that implementation is a factor that's a key indicator of success.
No, that's my read too. I mean, I think the market has gotten smarter, and it got smarter because it had to. And really, and we've always put a lot of emphasis on that. I mean, implementation is so important, right? I mean, we think we have a great piece of software, but I mean, if it's not properly implemented, it can only go so far.
Yeah, and I think the sort of serious buying business, serious buyer team committee, RFPs, structure, knowing exactly what you want to do, that's always the way to go. Our most successful projects, and we've been very lucky to have many of those, have always come from the most well researched, well structured, sort of RFP style request for proposal type of sort of method of going at it. And that will separate your vendors from who can just demo something flashy and nice
Yep.
from those who can deliver, robust, system critical technology.
Yep. Well, there's one more data point in this section before we move on, because I find it somewhat striking is that dock scheduling system usage actually dropped, and it's fairly considerable, like 32% from last year to almost 19 this year. Meanwhile, 31% of respondents say automated dock scheduling is one of the most important features that they want. So on one side, you've got the want is up, but usage is down. I mean, and then that's a substantial gap too. I mean, it's really
Yeah, what do you think's driving that gap?
well, a couple possibilities. Some of it is, companies have tried it, didn't get the value, and they pulled out of it. And again, dock scheduling, it's not a trivial. I mean, in some ways it looks fairly trivial, but you've got multiple entities, outside entities dealing with your system, so you can enforce as much compliance with it as say you could if it was a system being run in, within the four walls.
Yeah.
That's part of it. Some of it is that it's bundled. People regard it as bundled with their bigger systems, WMS,
Yeah, yeah,
TMS,
yeah.
and so they don't necessarily see it as a standalone system. So, and some of it's just budget pressure, I think that, they don't it doesn't hit that priority level. So it falls underneath the level of we need to do something about it. So I think it's a little bit of all of those three. And again, that kind of reflects what we've seen. I mentioned earlier the customer that made a massive change from an embedded
The
system to
American grocer.
yeah, the
Yeah.
American grocer, exactly. So that fits into that whole a lot of what the survey showed us, which is kind of reassuring that what we see is what the market is responding
Yeah.
with as well. So at the end of it, I think there's a lot of want and not a lot of in production, really.
Yeah, and I think that lines up with the more broad buying picture overall. I mean, people want better, they want the best. They're just not getting to the
No,
deployment because
exactly,
what's promised is often not delivered for these guys.
exactly.
Yeah,
So here's the finding that I think probably every executive listening to this should really pay attention to. In the next 1 to 2 years, almost 73% of respondents say they're exploring potential solutions. Now that's up from almost 68% in
okay.
2025. So the interest is rising, but here's the odd thing, only 13% have a plan in place.
Yeah, that's surprising.
So, and that number was almost 20% last year. So in 1 year, the share of buyers who've actually committed to a roadmap dropped by about a third.
Wow.
And this again brings us back to that silver bullet syndrome, right? I mean, people want to get the results; they don't want to put the work in. And hey, it's I don't know. I've never seen I've never seen that to be a successful way of doing things, honestly.
No, definitely not.
So yeah, I mean, effectively, I mean, what you're seeing, it's not really a buying signal. It's kind of a hesitation of
Yeah,
sorts.
yeah, yeah.
And I guess the real question is why,
I guess this one I'd like to take. I guess it was my day to day
right?
once upon a
That's
time.
true. Yeah.
So the hardest part of any technology project that I saw was always trying to, apart from choose the vendor, is to align your different stakeholders within your business.
Yeah.
Operations obviously play a big part. They often the first people to feel the pain. IT, it's a technology system. They want to know it's fit for purpose. It fits in with their ecosystem. It's scalable. Finance, obviously, they're going to pay for it. They want the return and they want it fast. And anybody else outside that, carriers, brokers, vendors, suppliers, they have to be able to adopt this too. Otherwise, it kind of stops in its tracks pretty early. So I think a big mistake that people make that often slows things down or gets to this point of indecision is not aligning all of those groups to say, okay, everybody gets their piece of the puzzle. Everybody has their direction of travel, but we have to align on these things and understand
Right.
what great looks like, what's deliverable, and how much it should deliver back in ROI versus what it costs. And often that doesn't happen, or those conversations happen further down the line, and it just stalls everything because nobody can agree on it, right? So you got 4 or 5 major groups within just the business, and if they're not aligned, it's not going to happen. Um, you know, every demo would probably satisfy all those guys. They tick the boxes, but it's when you go deeper, when you go
Right.
and really explore. Does a supplier, a technological software supplier, really do all of these things for all these people and go in the direction you need to go at the speed you want to go at?
Cool. So I guess so. Then what you're saying is the bottleneck really isn't the software market; it's the buying
Yeah, the
process.
survey backs it up. I mean,
Yeah.
budget constraints lead to robot blocks at 43.6%, lengthy decision making is 36%, vendor offerings don't match the needs, and a lack of internal alignment is 26%. I
Mm,
mean, like that's a big number. A
yeah.
quarter of all organizations that are in the survey can't agree internally on what they want to go or what they want to do with the software and where they want to take it. That's not a vendor problem. That's an organizational problem, in my
No, for
opinion.
sure.
Yeah.
And it's a problem that we as vendors we can't fix from the outside either. I mean, it's the best demo in the world doesn't it's not going to bridge a disagreement between your ops director and the CFO. I mean, it never does, never
Yeah.
has, never will.
No, exactly. And it's why 72% of the people who are exploring, quote unquote,
Right.
never buy.
No.
They're not stuck on the software because the software or the market failed them. They're stuck because the internal conversation doesn't happen, isn't structured well, and is not early enough in the process.
Right. 100%. So, I mean, if you're listening to this and you're an operator thinking about evaluating dock and yard technology, here's the advice I would give. It's basically don't start with the vendor demo. Sure, you can, go ahead, do some vendor demos as just kind of preparatory work, but that's not the start of your process. You need to start with those internal conversations, get your ops team, your IT team, your finance team, and agree on what you're actually trying to fix, right? So agree on what, as you mentioned, what does success look like in 12 months, and what does it look like in 36 months, and agree on who's going to own that project. Um, because again, that's something we see all the time. I mean, and yard is always a little bit peculiar as well because there's so many different departments
Yeah.
that are in contact with the yard. So it's not just as simple to say, it's going to be the warehouse that runs it.
Yeah.
It could be transportation
Well,
that
no one
takes the
has a
lead.
yard department,
No,
right? It's
exactly.
several others
Exactly.
all playing the same game.
So once you've found that project champion, which is so important, once you've done all that other work I talked about, then you can talk to vendors. But really, I mean, you've got to do that before you talk to
Oh,
vendors.
it's so key, and we see it in our day to day. If the right person is not driving it, they don't own it, they don't have the empowerment from the business to get things done, then you're going to end up in this evaluation purgatory, limbo land, right? Three vendors, 18 months, no decision.
Yeah.
You just wasted a ton of time. All these people that are IT, finance, they're all costly if they're not doing their normal day to day. So you've wasted time, you've wasted money. Meanwhile, the technology has moved on as well. So,
Yeah.
what do you do then? Got to reestablish your requirements and go again.
No, exactly. I mean, and it's so much the case. I mean, I mean, we could look at our sales pipeline from 3 years ago, and we're still talking to some of the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
folks. So, and the crazy thing is that by the time they end up choosing a vendor, which is hopefully us, their requirements have changed, right?
Yeah.
So, it's it's just yeah, it's not an easy situation, but again, it requires focus and it requires commitment to kind of move things forward.
Couldn't agree more. And I wanted to come back to a thread that you flagged earlier, which is quite interesting. The operators who reach for technology in the peak instead of overtime, the 34%.
Mhm.
I think this is connected to the same sort of topic.
Oh,
I
yeah?
think.
No, well, yeah, I'm interested.
I mean, yeah, well, my opinion is the operators who went for technology in their peak instead of just spending and throwing resource are the ones who did that internal alignment 12 months earlier, maybe even 18 months, right? They didn't make a better decision necessarily in the peak. They just made an earlier decision, right? And the 51% of the people that reach for overtime, they're not worse operators. You might argue, like for like, without systems, with clipboards and spreadsheets, they might be better, right? What they aren't is prepared for the real thing that's happening at peak, which is
Right,
a tsunami of volume, of activity, of pressure. And, they're the guys that got caught in the alignment gap, really.
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's really the through line, I think, of the whole report. It's
Yeah.
the operators who are pulling ahead aren't the ones with better technology necessarily. They're the ones with better internal clarity and the ones that have done the legwork and the planning and so
Yeah.
forth.
Well, okay, let's maybe step back and talk about the wider lens. Two numbers really stood out for me. 95.7% of respondents said sustainability is important or extremely important in their software decision. I mean, that's up from 91% last year. And
Yeah.
87% say that driver experience matters, which I thought was, I guess, very interesting.
No, I mean, do you think those are would be nice numbers, or or is that something that's really happening?
I think a few years ago they would be nice numbers to some people, like some of the operators that were just focused on money and performance. But I think something real is happening. Something's changing. And from an operator's perspective, I think there's a bit of a realization that sustainability is not just a tick box on an RFP sheet or something they have to deliver as part of a green project. It's not just carbon, it's dwell time, it's detention, it's drivers idling, it's indecision, things that you can physically measure on the
Right.
dock. Throughput, productivity, optimization.
I mean, it's what we live every day,
Of
right? Our
course.
customers live that all the time.
Of course, it's the CFO interested in this kind of stuff as let's say the sustainability lead or something like that in a business. So when sustainability gets defined in that way, with a dollar value, with a KPI, with a productivity metric, it stops being a soft and it starts being, in everybody's focus. Dwell time costs money, detention costs money, all of these metrics with, idling of any sort, it costs money and it disappoints customers, right? So suddenly the sustainability and efficiency are in the same conversation. They're one and the
Yeah,
same.
exactly. So, and now buyers can actually put, a buyer can put a real number
Of
behind it,
course, of course.
and that's what's moving, something from an RFP filler to real. It's a real top RFP scoring point.
Definitely. And the same with driver experience. I think at one point it was just a fluffy term that was trying to, trying to make drivers feel like they were, that they mattered more to the businesses. But I think it's actually a measurable KPI, right? I used to run these kind of distribution centers once upon a time.
Well, you had drivers reporting to you.
Yeah, directly shunter drivers, truck drivers, and they talk. They are, they're kind of a dynamic group of people. They might be on the road one minute, they might be kind of at a base one minute. They know, they see what goes on, and every site they kind of internally score. Does it have good facilities? Does it have a good reputation? Do I have to get out and walk places? I'm going to be sat in a big line just to get in on site when I've arrived at my scheduled time. You know, you lose the drivers. If you're reliant on carriers, you're not a shipper of choice. The drivers don't want to go there. All of a sudden, you're not used in the same way, and your value as a place that someone wants to do business with goes down pretty quickly.
Right.
Drivers don't want to go to a site with poor facilities or waiting around. The chain is short. People that don't run the yards, maybe they don't see it.
No, exactly. And, driver experience used to be that soft metric we talk about at the trade shows and industry conferences. But the 87% number in this report tells me that it's really it's an operational KPI now. And I think the companies that figure that out first, they're going to lock in that carrier loyalty. And it's been a topic that it's been a little bit controversial, I guess, at points to say, is there really a driver shortage? I think it's showing that the shortage aspect was maybe exaggerated, but the importance, though, still of garnering a certain loyalty from carriers
Yeah.
by treating them properly and just helping, turning around drivers quickly, all that goes to making sure that you can procure transportation when you need it and get it at a good price.
Exactly. And it kind of goes back to this manual idea, right? Most of what I'd imagine, well, most of what drivers used to tell me was, I have to go and do this stuff that's clearly down to poor planning or operation,
Right.
flat, bottlenecks,
Your
right?
problem has become my
Of
problem now.
course, you don't have a good facility, so I have to walk to the edge of the site, which is going to take me 10 minutes because these sites are humongous, and I've got to do that in wind, rain, snow. That's not efficient for me. That's not good for me. But to these guys, sometimes it's an afterthought. But that's waste.
Yeah.
Longer the driver's on the site, longer it takes them to get their truck and trailer and get to the next destination. And it's just, if you go to a store, forget logistics for a second, you go to a grocery store, if you can get in and out and the place is clean and the checkout at the cash is really quick and efficient, you might go there again. You go to one where in a big line, there's only one person
Oh,
working.
tell me about
It's
that.
yeah, exactly. So I think drivers are just like anybody else, where if it's inefficient, it stands out, it's negative, it's wasteful, and drivers don't like it, and they won't put up with it. It's
Oh,
as simple as
exactly.
that.
I mean, essentially, that driver experience and manual processes, which we've already been talking, they aren't two different problems. I mean, they're the same problem, and they're basically just measured from two different angles.
Exactly.
So, Neil, let me try and pull this together. So, if I'm an operator listening to this, or an exec deciding on whether to invest in this category next year, what do I take away? Well, I'll start with one, and then I'll hand it over to you. So, stop buying visibility, start buying execution. Little slogan there.
Yeah.
Visibility is the floor now, right? I mean, I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
That's where everyone's starting expecting visibility has to be there. The question is, what's the system going to do with that visibility or that data?
Yeah.
Now, can it reschedule? Is it going to talk to your WMS, your TMS?
Yeah.
Can it communicate with drivers? And that's one thing we've seen a lot of advance with our C3 Hive product, in that it facilitates that whole in-yard workflow, which is something that, like you said, it makes a huge difference if the driver doesn't have to get out of his
Oh,
truck, or somebody in the warehouse has to call them. So those are the things that does your software allow you to do all these touch points?
yeah.
Does it actually support your business workflows?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, a more detailed view of your problem is not the same as solving it. I mean, you just gotta, um, it's, that's it. So I don't know what
Well, I guess
you
there's
think.
two from me, and I try and take this from the operator side. Is just first, repeating myself, but it's key. Do the internal work before you sit down and talk to vendors.
No,
All
exactly.
right. Demos are
That's
cool,
huge.
but you need to know what's your problem, how you want it to be fixed, and then how you're going to kind of, tackle the full process from research right through to delivery and scaling up across your network. Okay. It's key. If you don't start on that point, you're not going to do the best job
Yep.
possible. Align all your departments, make sure everybody is going in the right direction, and then evaluate. And then I guess the second one is manual touches. If you have a software supplier or tech supplier and you're still doing workarounds, then that is not a comprehensive, all-encompassing, best-of-breed system, and you should probably think again. Because
Yeah.
manual stuff, it's mistakes, it's cost, it's frustration of your people. All of them are not good for your operation or for your business. Okay. Adding a screen is cool, but every time you have to do a phone call or you got to refer back to a spreadsheet, you're not efficient.
No.
You're kind of slipping back to old habits. So, don't ask what the system does. The true question is, what does it remove?
No. 100%. And I think the last one, and I think this connects everything we've talked about today, is that plan in the off season,
Mm,
right? So that again, we go back to that 34% who reached for technology in peak. They made that decision at least 12 months earlier. So the operators who win in 2026 aren't going to win because they made a better call under pressure. They're going to win because they did the work in the quiet months to be ready when the pressure came up, right?
yes, it's discipline. It's not a budget line item, right?
No, exactly. It's not, do I have the money for technology? It's, do I have the discipline to do this work when nothing is on fire, really?
Exactly.
So, well, Neil, I guess what, to close this up, what surprised you the most in this data?
Oh, by a long way, I think it was the plans in place number, 19% down to 30%.
Yeah, that was
I
a
mean,
tough
that
one.
was significant.
Yeah.
The industry knows it has a problem, and unfortunately, is further from solving it than it was this time last year, which
Yeah.
is, that doesn't sound good for
It's disappointing.
exactly. And that's a number that I think every executive should be aware of. If you run a supply chain, it's telling you there's a gap between intent and action, which is a concern. And the operators who are, close this off first are going to pull away from the field, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, that's an advantage opportunity.
Well, mine is the manual process, I started with. That's a tough one. Again, 26 years I've been doing this, and we know that today when we gain a new customer, 99% of the time we're replacing manual processes. We're not replacing existing software, right? So that's a tough one. You're plugging away all the time, going to conferences, vendor announcements. We're doing all of our digital transformation tech, articles, and the problem got worse, really. So it's that doesn't necessarily make me cynical, but it tells me we still got a lot of work to do, right? So the gap between where this industry says it wants to be and where it actually is wider than it was 12 months ago. That's the hard reality.
Yeah,
But I guess the operators who close it they're gonna look very different from the operators who don't,
definitely.
and especially like from 3 years from now, it's gonna make a huge difference.
Totally. And I think the good news that comes out of this survey is we know where to start, right? Internal alignment, real, quality integration with your systems, implementation that does everything, leaves no stones unturned, and actually delivers and finishes, right?
Yeah.
That's key. Driver experience as a KPI, not just a nice buzzword.
Yeah,
And,
that's key.
and these are not mysteries. They're, fundamental choices you need to make.
Yeah. Well, 26 years in, the category is bigger than it's ever been, and the need is more obvious than it's ever been, and the buying process is harder than it's ever been. So, that's the paradox,
Yeah.
I guess, of 2026. So the operators who are going to navigate this well are going to pull ahead, and the ones that don't will spend another year kind of, fighting fires in peak.
Of course, and the full report for those who want to go into a bit more detail is in the show notes.
Yeah, I mean, we just kind of touched on the
we
key
try
points
to
there.
keep it, high level, dip in and out for the relevant stuff. But the data's definitely worth sitting with and sort of digesting, even the uncomfortable parts.
Yeah, and really, especially those parts, right? So, hey, thanks everyone for listening, and Neil, it's always a pleasure.
Likewise, Greg. Thanks a lot.